Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Batra daf Dalid. We're going to get started with the very top of our daf. We started the story of Herod and how he killed all the Chachamim, leaving only Bava ben Buta. And why did he want to leave Bava ben Buta? As we ended yesterday, he wanted to get advice from him. So even though he wanted advice from him, or maybe because he wanted advice from him, well, he blinds him in the eye. What does he do? He makes him a crown from the skin of a porcupine with all the thorns in it, puts it on his eyes, around his eyes, pokes his eyes out, and now Bava ben Buta is blind. Why he does this, we'll see from the next section. Yom Echad ata biyativ kameh. So Herod comes in front of Bava ben Buta and realizes that Bava ben Buta is not going to know who he is, and therefore he has a good opportunity here. Whether Bava ben Buta realizes it's Herod or not, we don't really know, but here goes the story. He goes in front of Bava ben Buta as if he's just a regular person. Did you see that terrible slave, what he did? Speaking obviously of himself. Amarle, my Avile says, so what? What am I going to do to him? Amarle, Nilati Amar, why don't you curse him? Amarle, my Tiv, even in your thoughts, you shouldn't curse a king, it says in Sefer Kohelet. Amarle, I love Melechu, but this guy is not even really a king. Again, this is Herod speaking about himself. He wants to see whether Bava ben Buta is going to go against him or not. Amarle, Shiur ba'alma. Okay, fine. Maybe even if you say he's not a king, at least he's a wealthy person. And uktiva b'chadrei mishkavcha al tkalel ashir. In Kohelet, there in the same chapter, it says you shouldn't, in your chambers, your bed chambers, you shouldn't curse a wealthy person. So basically, shouldn't curse him either because of his wealth. To which he says, and not only that, but lo yehe ela nasi. At least he's like a prince, even, right? In other words, either he's not a king, if you want to say, or maybe he's not, but at least he's either a wealthy person or a prince, right? He's a prominent person, either which way you put it. And it says in the Torah, don't curse a nasi in your nation. Amar, so comes Herod with the halachic answer and basically says, hey, what do you mean? It says, Nasi b'amcha lo ta'or is only ba'amcha, when he's part of your nation, when he's doing what you're supposed to be doing, when he's a good person. But this guy, right? He killed all the chachamim, right? He's clearly not part of your nation. He's not a good person. Amrle, so here comes Bava ben Buta with another excuse. Mistafina mine, I'm actually scared of him. Okay, now we're going to see. We're going to remember what he says, because later you're going to find this in the mouth of somebody else. So I'm scared of him. Amarle, so he says, what are you scared of? Herod says, there's nobody here who's going to tell anybody, or who was going to tell him, it's just you and me here. There's nobody else. You can curse him. It's fine. What are you scared of? Amarle, ktiv ki of hashamayim yolichat hakol ubal knafayim yagid haval. But in Kohelet it says, the birds are going to take, it's also in the same chapter, the birds are going to carry your words. So even though it looks like nobody's here, somehow it might get back to him. I'm not willing to do it. Amarle, so at this point, Herod says, really? Wow. Anahu, I am he says. I never would have killed all these Talmidei Chachamim, but I know that they would have protected me and they wouldn't have cursed me. I thought everyone was going to curse me and they were going to kick me out from being king. And that's why I killed them all. But had I realized that, they would have all been like you, I never would have done this. So now he feels very remorseful. What can I do to rectify the situation? Amarle, you took out, okay, he talks about him in the third person, but he turned off the light of the world, or okay, the mitzvah is a candle, the Torah is a light. Basically, by killing all the Talmidei Chachamim, you took the light out of the world. So you should light up the world again. How will you do that? Well, now he's describing the Beit HaMikdash, which is a place where all the goyim will naharu elav. Now, naharu really means we'll gather there. But what he's using here is the language nahora is also light. And it's going to be lit up by all the nations. And basically, I want you to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, right? That's what Herod ends up doing. And this whole story actually seems like it's coming to number one, explain how it is that Herod came to redo the temple. And this is the rabbi's version of the story, why he wanted to redo the temple. And number two, and I think this is more important, the rabbis are trying to justify how was the Beit HaMikdash rebuilt by someone as horrible as Herod? Like, how can we grapple with that as a people, right? We have this holy of holy places built by someone, right? If you think about it, Shlomo HaMelech wasn't allowed to, David HaMelech wasn't allowed to build the temple because he killed a lot of people, and he had actually killed bad people. Herod killed good people. How on earth could he be involved in building a temple? Comes the Gemara to explain, well, it was all part of a process of tshuva, repentance. He felt bad about what he did, and this is the way he atoned for it. And then it becomes a holy building of the temple in a sense. Okay, and that's like, I think, the rabbi's way of grappling with how to deal with the fact that Herod's the one who rebuilt this. Not just why did he do it, but how could we deal with it as a people that it was rebuilt by him? Some people give a different pasuk that he used when, and a different thing that Bava ben Buta said to him, he put out the eye of the world. This is actually a reference also to himself. Bava ben Buta was blinded, physically blinded. Here he means it metaphorically, but he put out the light of the world from the eyes of the nation, and the eyes of the nation are the rabbis. So he should fix the eye of the world, which is like where everybody's eyes are turned toward, and that's the temple. Right? I'm going to desecrate the place, your sanctified kingdom, which is Mahmad Enechem, the beauty. It's the place where your eyes all look to. Okay, that's a pasuk in Yechezkel. So he says to Herod, build a temple. What's Herod's reaction? Amalei, mistafina mi malchuta. I'm scared of the Romans. Okay, so we have Bava ben Buta was scared of Herod, but Herod isn't the last one on earth here. Herod is scared of the Romans who are in charge of him. So he says, they're never going to let me rebuild the temple. Amarle, here's my advice to you. Okay, now we go back to, he left Bava ben Buta alive to be able to give him advice. Here's his advice. So first piece of advice, rebuild the temple. Second piece of advice, how you're going to deal with the Romans. Shadr shlicha, send a messenger. V'lezel shat, it'll take him a year to get there. Liakev shata, have him spend about a year there in Rome dealing with, getting his answer. The lihader shata, and it'll take him a year to get back. By that point, 3 years will have elapsed. In the meanwhile, adahachi bahachi, in the meanwhile, satrit le, you'll already take it down. Binyayat le, you'll already have built it. Have it, and then you'll be ready at that point. What he's saying is, right, try to say, oh yeah, I asked you, but till I got an answer, until the messenger came back, until the blah, 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 oh, it's already done, too late. That's what he suggests he does. Abed Hachi, he does exactly this. Shalchule, they sent back to him. Here was their answer he got after 3 years. By the way, this is a big reference to what we're going to get to in the third chapter, Chezkat Batra, which is a very famous, the most famous chapter in Bava Batra, which is all about living in land for 3 years, and that you have a chazak in the land. Once, it's already a done deal, like 3 years we've been dealing with this, and it's already, no one's complained yet, and now all of a sudden you come at the end of 3 years and say, don't do it, right? It's a little too late at that point. So what does he do? He does that, and here comes their answer. Im lo satarta, if you didn't knock it down yet, al tistor, don't knock it down. Im satarta, al tivneh. If you've knocked it down, don't rebuild it. Im satarta banita, and if you already knocked it down and rebuilt, which is what he did, avde bisha batar da avde mitmalchim. Okay, you lowly slave, you obviously ask advice from lowly people, and you got terrible advice, which is really not appropriate. Im zianech halach sifrach kan. If your weapons are upon you, then right, that you killed all these people, sifra yuchsin, right? If you think you killed everybody in the kingdom so that you could be the only one king, sifrach kan, we have the yuchsin, we have all the facts about you. Lo racha v'lo bar recha, you're not a king and you're not the son of a king. How is recha? King, we'll get to that in a minute. Hordus avda kalanya midavid, you're basically a nobody. You're a terrible, lowly slave. Okay, and we know that about it. My racha, malchuta. How do we know that racha is malchuta? So first of all, it comes from the Latin, which means kingdom. And where do we know that from? The Reich. Right? The Third Reich is kingdom. But the Torah is, they're going to learn it from the Torah. Dechtiv anochi hayom rachu mashuach melech. Okay, this is first about David HaMelech. He was rachu mashuach melech, describing him when he became king, and the other is about Yosef when he becomes the Mishneh LaMelech to Paro after Paro's dream. So it says they will call you Avrech. Amre. Now they say about the rebuilding of the temple of Herod. Misha lo ra'a binyan. Or just anyone who didn't see this, lo ra'a binyan ne'em yamav. This is the most beautiful building there was in the world. B'mai banye, what did he build it with? Amarabba ba'avnei shesha u'mirmara. That's green marble and white marble. Ikad amre ba'avnei kuchla shesha u'mirmara. Blue, green, and white marble. Apik safa va'ayel safa. He had this unique way of building it where we go in a row, out a row, in a row, out a row. I know exactly how this was. So that it would accept the plaster that would keep everything together. He wanted to cover the whole thing with gold. He wanted it as lavish could be. Rabbanit shavke, this is better like this, not covering the whole thing in gold because it looks like waves, okay, which is a very pretty look. Okay, and maybe also referencing the Yam, which is vast. Okay, now we have a basic question. Bava ben Buta hechi avid hachi. How did Bava ben Buta take this horrible person and let him repent? Okay, and why do we think it's a problem? Well, Ha'amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rabbi, Tamer Rav Yoshua ben Levi. Okay, either Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, or Rav Yoshua ben Levi said this. Why was Daniel punished? We're going to see from Sefer Daniel. He gave advice to Nebuchadnezzar how to repent. And because of that, he was punished. How he was punished, we're going to see later. But why he was punished, we're going to see first. Okay, so if you want it to be good for you and you want to redeem your sins, do it bitzdaka, with charity. If you help the aniyim, the poor people, that's how you will get. This will give you a longer amount of time of peaceful life before you get punished. Uchtiv, and then the bad came upon him. It took 12 months for it to happen. Okay, so it was pushed off for a year because of he did these charitable deeds. So the question is, how could Bava ben Buta have done something wrong, even though it doesn't seem wrong, right? We didn't get punished for this. So either Shane Avda Dichai b'mitzvah, well, if Herod was a slave, Canaanite slaves are actually obligated in mitzvah. It's not like Nebuchadnezzar, who was an evil person who wasn't even Jewish, right? So we want to always give people a chance to repent if they're doing mitzvah. This is a fascinating reason. If it weren't for the king, there's no other way to rebuild the temple. So he was our only choice. The temple needed to be rebuilt. It was in a bad state. There was no choice. So therefore, sometimes you can do things that aren't really the right things to do because we have other motives in mind and other things that are more important than that. Now we want to know Daniel Minayin Yanish. How do we know that he was punished? And they say, Amarav Hatach Zed Daniel. Maybe it's Hatach. Hatach was Daniel. And why is that a punishment? Well, first of all, Hatach appears in the beginning of the Megillah and doesn't appear after that. So after, right, in Perek Dalet, he appears, and I don't think he appears after that. Certainly not like at the end of the story at all. So, why was he called Hatach? From the language of lachtoch, to cut. He was cut off from his greatness. And that's what we see. The fact that he was Hatach shows that he was cut down from his greatness. If it was a positive word, Hatach is everything was cut. All the things of the king were cut according to his words, meaning he had a lot of power. Then that's not a bad thing that Daniel was Hatach. It wasn't a punishment. Well, then, so there's a big debate about Hatach in general. So if he was if he was someone who was cut from his greatness, then we get that was Daniel, and now he's just kind of a lowly servant. But if he was someone who was great, then it's not really a punishment. So we have a different answer. Well, remember, he was thrown in the cave with the lion's den. And even though he was saved from it, which was a huge miracle, but it was pretty scary to go in there, just the fear of going in there in the first place, that's enough of punishment for him. Hakol kiminhag Medina. So now we have everything is kiminhag Medina. This is back to the Mishnah. So now we're going to go through line by line of the Mishnah. So the Mishnah started off, we have partners, neighbors, or they want to put a mechitza in their courtyard. They own this joint courtyard. They want to put a mechitza in the middle. So we go by the minhag makom, what you use for building, and a kol minhag medina. Now, it already said makom shenagu, so why do you need to say everything is like minhag medina? Everything goes by the custom of the land. Hakol latuya mai, what's this coming to include? Latuya atra dinihige behutza v'dafne. It's to say, even if the place where they make things is generally hutza and dafna, which are palm or laurel branches, then again, number one, first of all, you can insist that you're not going to do something more than that, right? If you want to pay less, say we could do it like this. And also, if somebody wants to do less than that, the other side can force them. That's the minimum. Okay, we can't do it worse than that. Lefichach, next line. Im nafal hakotel hamakom va'avanim shel shnehem. Right, so since they both jointly build it, therefore, if the stones fall and the wall falls, then the space that it's on, we assume, is 50-50 your land and my land. Let's say we're the ones. And when the stones from the wall fall, we split them 50-50. To which the Gemara says, Pshita, that's very obvious. Why do you need to say it? Must be a case where it all fell into one of the sides. Inami depaninu. So either, let's say, a wind broke the wall and the whole thing went into one person's yard, or one of them, after it fell evenly, one of them quickly took all the stones and put them on their side. So in this case, you might have thought, maybe since now it's all on one side for either which reason, if, let's say, it's all on your side, if I want to get it out, the burden of proof is on me because we don't really know for sure who built it. Well, kamash malan, no. We assume they built it half-half, and therefore I can even take from your property without further proof, without proving that I was the one who built it. That's what the Mishnah is telling you. Now we get to this next complicated line. The next line is v'chein begina, and likewise in a garden. Remember, there's house, courtyard outside the house. Outside the courtyard, there's a garden. And then there's the bik'ah, which is the valley where there's all the fields, and that's outside the city. The gina is like a garden inside the city, but it's not really a chatzer, it's much less private. So now it says, v'chein begina, and same in the garden. What happens in the garden? Makom shenagu ligdor mechayvin oto. If it's a place where people generally have walls around their gardens, then one side can force the other. But bibik'ah, but in a valley where it's just fields, normally people don't have barriers up. If you have a custom not to put up, then you're not forced to. There's a little bit of a problem about this because it sounds like in the garden, if you have a general custom to do it, then you can force the other one. Without a custom, you can't. What if it's neutral? Well, it sounds like you also can't force the other side. But the bik'ah, it says only if there's a custom not to. Otherwise, it sounds like you can. You can't force the other side. And that you would think it would be the opposite. The Gina would go in the direction of stam, like we don't know either which way. You would maybe be able to force more so than the valley where, nobody really has barriers in general, borders on their fields. Again, assuming this whole issue is all privacy, which is what we've been discussing. There's no privacy. You don't need privacy in the fields. So we're going to have a problem with this. So this mission makes no sense exactly for why I said. In the garden, if there's a custom, then we can force the other side. But without any custom, hastama, right, which could be there's a custom not to, or there just isn't a custom, then one side can't force the other. But seifa, the next line, contradicts this. And if you didn't get it the first time I said it, now you'll see it inside. Aval bik'an, the valley, makom shnagu shelo ligdor. Only if there's a custom specifically not to make fences. Ein mechayvinoto, then one side can't force the other. But hastama, but if there is no minhag either which way, mechayvinoto, it sounds like you could force. So hashta stam gina amart lo, if in the stam gina you don't need to. Stam bik'an mibaya, you'd be able to force? No, of course not. Again, it's much less likely there's anyone who's going to be able to force someone in a field to put up a barrier. So Amar Abai Hachikam. Abai says, read it like this. Stam gina. Okay, remember it said Chaim begina makom shnagu ligdor. Now they're going to say no, we didn't mean that. We meant the first thing is Chaim begina, meaning a stam gina. You can force someone. And bimkom shnagu ligdor bibik'ah mechayvinoto. They're going to add the bik'ah is already in that first sentence. And in a place where they generally have a custom in a bik'ah, then we can force you. And then it says, and if there's no custom, then no. Now, that still doesn't really make sense, and that's what Rav is going to say. So why does it say, but in a bik'ah? As if we're just introducing the bik'ah at that point. If we introduce the bik'ah already, it doesn't make sense to say, but in the bik'ah, when we're describing the bik'ah. So it's a very difficult shot. Therefore, Rav says a different explanation. Ela amar Rav, hachi katani. This is how you should read it. V'chein stam gina So we didn't say stam gina there, but we're going to say when it says that's two things. We're saying a stam gina is really one thing, but it's a stam gina is like as if there's a makom shenagu. Okay, so only if the custom is not to, otherwise you can actually force. So stam gina is like makom shenagu, and that's how to read it. And it's like makom shenagu l'gdor dame. It's like that, and therefore you can force. And then the next line is, when it says bik'ah in a makom shenagu shelo l'gdor, again, we're going to say it's talking about a stam. B'stam bik'ah, but a general, the assumption, even if there's no custom, in a valley is kimakom shelo nahagu dam. It's like a place where they don't have any custom, where they have a custom not to. Okay? Or it's like a place where there is no custom, and therefore, again, you can't force them. Ella, next line. If you're in a valley, it now says, Im ratza kones l'toch shelo boneva oseh chazit mibachutz. Okay, they skip that word here, but I'll read it anyway. If they want to, though, and both sides want to in the fields, if one side wants to in the field, they put the wall on their side, meaning you can't build your wall into at all the field of the other. You can't use their space. And what do? You make a chazit on the outside. What's a chazit? We're going to explain right now. My chazit, Amar Afuna, ach pele lekarna leva. We're going to have a bunch of different interpretations. There's a debate among the commentaries whether there's a machloka between them or they're just all suggesting different options. So you can build something that juts out at the top, like an extra row sticking out of the wall at the top that juts into the other person's property. So if I'm building it, I have it jut into your property. Now we're going to have a whole thing. Why should it jut into your property? Why not my property, right? How am I getting into the airspace of your property and why? So ne'avde miligyo. Okay, we're going to learn these words. Bar is chutz. We've learned that many times. Braita is outside source. Okay, bar is wild animals, chayot bar. And miligyo is bifnim, inside. So bar is outside. So they said, make the karna levar outside. And then they say, why don't you make it inside, jutting into your property? Well, the problem is, avichavre nami mi levar. Well, your friend could, in other words, if I make it on my side, jutting into my side, which proves that it's mine. And if it was to fall, everyone will know, well, it was jutting into my side. It was all mine. That's our sign. Well, you could theoretically add on to your side of the wall, and then you'll claim it's yours. So and it's 50-50. So, and that's what we're going to say right now. And you'll say it's mine and it's his, or hers, in our case. So they say, therefore, the rule is always jut it into the other person's, and that's the sign everyone knows. If it juts into the other person's field, that means I built it. But then if it's on their side, they could just cut it off. So and then they could say it's all mine. It's 50-50, you'll say. So they say, no, if you cut the wall, you break off some of the stones there, everyone's going to know. It's going to be obvious you knocked it off. It's noticeable. It's very hard to break something without it being noticeable. So then we'll know that you did it, and therefore it won't happen, or we'll at least know. And then if it does fall, the wall, we'll know it's all mine, and the property that it was on is all mine. Some people say that Rav Huna said the exact opposite. He specifically said, put it in on my side, have it jut out. If I'm building the wall, then it juts out into my side, to which the Gemara says, why don't we make it outside? To which they say, guys, because you could cut it, and that's why we don't do it on your side. And you'll say it's mine and yours. So they say, well, if that's the case, maybe there's a problem, because if I do it on my side, you could add on your side. And then you could do it yourself. So they say, no, if you add later a part on your side, it's going to be obvious that it was added, right? If you paint your house a year after you had already painted it, it's noticeable where you repaint it, because it comes out a little different. If you're going to add to it later, it's going to be very obvious that you added, and then it'll be clear that it's not really yours. But the problem with this reading is v'hami b'chutz katane, but it's said in the Mishnah, you add the chazit outside. By the way, the chazit comes from chaze, which is to see. It's something noticeable. This is actually interesting. We started our daf about blindness and not seeing, and then here we have the something that's noticeable that we see. So So Kasha, they say, yeah, this second reading from Huna really doesn't seem to work with the Mishnah, and therefore it seems like they're rejecting it. Rabbi Yochanan Amar. Here comes our second answer. We had two, but it was really two of one because it was two readings of what Rav Huna said, and we rejected really the second one. Rabbi Yochanan says, Nishie ba'amta milafar. Why don't we have you put up a strip of clay, like put some clay on top of the wall, on the other side of the wall, on your side. Again, we have to explain mibachutz, 1 amma wide, long. So we're going to have you kind of put some clay over the top of the wall, jutting into the other side, so that everyone knows that it's all my wall. Again, they're going to ask, why don't you do it on the inside? Avid chavre milavar, because then you'll just add on your side in va'amar didi v'didehu, and you'll say it's mine and yours. Ihachi hashanami de kafele chavre, but if I put this clay on the wall on your side, you'll just peel it off. So va'amar didi v'didehu, and then you'll say it's 50-50. Kilufa made no, if you scrape off the clay, it's going to be noticeable, and then again, everyone will know that you scraped it off, and then I'll still be able to prove my point. Now we get to what if it was made of hutzah. Okay, so these were two different opinions. What we do if it's a regular wall, like a stone wall. What if it's made of, the wall is made of palm branches? What do? Amar Rav Nachman, sinufe yerechi milavar. Bunch of different interpretations of what this is, but it seems like one explanation is you tie the branches together and tilt them going outward. Okay, again, toward the other field. Why don't you do it toward your own field? Because again, the other side can just put a bunch in and turn them to his side or her side and claim ba'amar didi v'didehu. Again, the idea here. But if I have these palm branches going into your field, you could just easily cut them. Ba'amar didi v'didehu, and you'll say again, it's 50-50. Mashrik leitina. So we add clay to it. We put clay on the top there, cover it with clay, and then you won't be able to cut it. Hashtanami, again, you could peel off the clay. Kilufa made a idea. No, just like we said before, it'll be noticeable if you peel off the clay. Abaye disagrees with this whole opinion and says, Hutza lele takanta. There's really no way to deal with this hutza because it is pretty easy for you to just do it. You're either cut it down, peel it off, or do it on your own side. Ela bishtara. The only way to do it is to have a deed written up, a document that says, I built this wall, it's fully on my property, and that's the only way to do it. Now we're going to go to the next line in the Mishnah. Aval im asu midat shnehem. Okay, so now the Mishnah says, if you're in this bika, in the valley, and generally we don't do these walls, but if they decided to do it, okay, im asu midat shnehem, they both decide to build the wall, so we build it in the middle. We have it jut out in both directions. We're going to have to ask why. Why do you need that? Just build it in between. And why don't we just assume it's a typical wall? And therefore, so again, if it falls, we assume the space and the stones are 50-50. So the Gemara asks, why don't we just skip the chazit? Who needs it? Right? Neither side does it, and it's obvious. It's split 50-50. If one side decided to make a chazit going their way, which then later on they could claim, if the second side doesn't make this chazit, then the first person will say, Amar didehu. Say, look, the whole thing is mine, because look, it's jutting into my, right, that, again, you have a bit of a problem. How did he make it? Maybe he made it jutting into my field. And then basically he'll claim, oh, look, it's jutting into your field. That means it's fully mine. To which therefore, the Mishnah is kind of telling you, well, to avoid that kind of a problem, you also add a chazit. To which the Gemara says, the Tana is there to give us advice how to avoid people cheating you, which, by the way, sometimes it does. Well, they say, well, also the first part was, the whole reason why you put the chazit in the first place was to avoid someone from claiming it was that they had 50% of it. So here it's someone claiming they had 100% of it. What's the difference? In the Reisha, first they told you the law, which was, right, because in the Bika'at, there's not a general minhag ligdor, so you can't force them. And once they got into that, right, they said, well, you can build yourself, but you should avoid problems. But the whole main halacha wasn't about avoiding someone tricking you. But but the seifa, there's no real purpose for that last part. If we both agree that we both split the price, we know that. The whole thing was, well, if one side builds this chazit, then the other side should build one also to avoid problems. So that's really why they asked this question. So Ravina answers that we can explain this differently because of the problem we just mentioned. We're talking about palm branches. And what he was really coming to say is to go, the way he reads the Mishnah was saying Abai is wrong. The Mishnah was saying, don't think that when there's palm branches that there's no resolution. No, make a chazit mikan and mikan, and if it's one of you, make a chazit. Anytime there's palm branches, there is a way to do it. You don't need to have a document. You can use these things, and we're not right. Put the clay on it and make sure they won't to avoid them cutting it down. Basically, he agrees with the first opinion of Rav Nachman and not with Abaye. Okay, so let's review before we get to the next Mishnah, because now we're going to start a new section. What we had so far was the end of the story of Herod and Bava ben Buta and how it comes about, really, that Herod built the temple and how gorgeous and amazing the temple was that he built. What was it made of? How did Bava ben Buta help Herod do tshuva? Is it not like Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar and Daniel got punished? And then we went to dealing with the different cases in the Mishnah. What Hakol Kiminhagim Medina comes to teach you. What this issue, the difference between the Gina and the Bigan, how to actually read the simple reading of the Mishnah in those two cases, seems to be kind of saying something incorrect, and we had to reread it to make it make sense. Then we had this chazit that you do to make sure that they're not cheating you, and how you do the chazit, which direction, what it looks like, all that. And then back to that last case about when we both make a chazit and why you need that in a case where we both agreed and we both each own 50-50. Now we're going to start with the next Mishnah. Okay, for this, there's a study guide today, which helps organize the last part. I'll already tell you there's a lot of different interpretations among commentaries about what exactly the case in the Mishnah is and what we're talking about. But generally, I'll tell you a few interpretations, and then we'll just kind of stick with one. You have a field in the middle, and I border you on all three sides. I'm around you, but not the fourth, or perhaps, yes, the fourth, okay? Could be I live around you. I have fields around you. We were talking about fields, not living. Fields around you on all four sides, or maybe only on all three. The simple reading does sound like all three, but some commentaries think you're surrounding all four. And now, so I'm surrounding you on three sides. And then I put up a fence. Now, where did I put the fence? Good question. Either between my fields and your fields, okay, on three sides, but not the fourth. Either I don't live on the fourth and that's why I didn't do it, or I live on the fourth, but I just didn't put up a fence. Or perhaps we're talking about I put a fence around my three fields, which basically protects your field that's in the middle of that on three sides, because now there's a fence around mine, which is around yours. So I'm not protecting it from between you and me, but I am protecting it from everybody else who lives on the outside on those three sides. Now, the problem is it's still open on one side. So you're not exactly protected. The other big deliberation about this Mishnah is, are we protecting you from people seeing you, like we talked about in the first Mishnah, Hezek Re'iyah, from privacy, which is weird because in the Sadeh, we don't really have privacy issues. So many people think it's privacy. And then either if it's between me and you, then I'm protecting you privacy from between us. Or if it's on the outside, then I'm protecting you from everyone else. Some people say that I'm protecting you from animals coming in and not from privacy. It's a totally different issue here. Okay, so a lot of lack of clarity here about what this case is. But we can still understand what the Mishnah is saying, what the Gemara is saying on that, even if we don't fully understand all the details. So let's just assume I live on three sides of you. Okay, let's take that case, and I'm putting up a border in between you and me. So I put up three borders here. You don't have to pay anything for these because I can't force you to pay because you're totally open on one side. So as much as I protected you, you're not really protected because either if people can see in on the other side or animals can get in, you're not protected. Rabbi Yossi Omer, if Now, we don't know who. There's another problem here. Who's the subject of the sentence? If he got up and closed off the fourth side, which one is this? Is it the person in the middle? Is it you? Or is it me who's on the outside and I close now the fourth side? If I don't live there, it's a little weird I would do it, but the truth is, according to Rabbi Yossi, there's a motivation because Megalgalim alav takol. Now, I can make you pay for the entire thing. So once I put up this fourth one, so let's say I don't even live there. Well, if I put up 3 and each one's $100, I have to pay $300. If I spend another $100 and put up the fourth, you'll have to pay half. And you'll pay me $200, and then I'll be in the money. So it's worth it for me to put up the fourth, even if it doesn't help me at all. If I live on the fourth side, then obviously it helps me anyway. So now I'm Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel Al-Chak Rabbi Yossi B'Paskel Nakim Damar Mama B'Gadar to Rabbi Ibla Galgalim Alav Takol. If you got up and closed it, who got up? Well, according to what Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, Loshna Amanikaf, Loshna Amamakif. It doesn't matter who. It could be the middle person, you living in the middle did it, which shows I clearly want this, and then you have to pay everything. Or if I did it and just I ended up providing you with a service. Now, this is like Zeneh Nevezelo Chasel. I benefited you, even though I didn't lose it. I didn't pay any extra. I did it for myself. But in the end, you benefited. Do you have to pay or not? So according to Rabbi Yossi, you have to pay anyway. Even though it didn't cost me any more, I would have done it anyway for my own sake. So that's what we have here, according to the Gemara. Okay, now, Itmar. Rav Huna Amar Hakol. What does it mean, Hakol? Megalgalim alav takol. Rabbi Yossi says everything you have to pay. Well, lefima shegadal, meaning if I put up a nice fancy wall, you have to pay $50. I paid $100 for each wall. You have to pay me $200. If I put up a fancy fence that costs $100 per fence, but you could have put one up for $30 with reeds, well, then all you have to pay me is 30 times 2 for the 2, right, for half. 30, that's it. 60 you would pay me, okay? You have to pay me for like the cheapest, reasonable, right, thing that could protect you. Because why should you have to pay? Because I decided to spend a lot of money on building this fence. Well, now we're going to have a problem with the Mishnah, though, because, and I didn't mention this when we read it, but let's read the Mishnah more carefully. It says in the Mishnah, you surround someone on 3 sides. Right? We can't force you to pay if I did it on 3 sides. But what does that imply? If I did it on 4 sides, what would Tanakama say? But that's what Rabbi Yossi says. In Maseifa, it says in the end of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi Amar, you have to pay the whole thing. So how do we, what's the machloket? Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi, they're just talking about different things, but they really say the same thing. Well, Bishlam ala Rav Huna, according to Rav Huna, who says hakol, meaning you have to pay everything, is lefima shegadarba. The $200 you're going to have to pay me for the nice fancy wall I built. Then you could say very simply, what's the machloket? Tanakama savar called the feed to make kanim bezol in umash gadar lo. You only have to pay me the $60 for the cheapest fence you could have gotten times the 2 walls, right? For half. Rabbi Yossi savar called it lefima shagadar. Rabbi Yossi says, no, you have to pay the full amount of whatever I spent, half of that. So that's a good understanding of the machlokah between them. We're going to see that the major assumption is that Tanakama is more lenient because Rabbi Yossi's language is hakol kafi megalgalina as if everything, as if it's. But we're going to have now a question according to Shiur Bar Rav, and we're going to give 4 interpretations. The last one, actually, which is a different variation of the third one, is going to actually put Rabbi Yossi on the other side, okay, and have Shiur Bar Rav be more stringent than Rabbi Yossi. But all the others are going to go the other way. Ella. So if you didn't understand that, it's fine. We're going to see it right now. Ella l'Chiur Bar Rav de Amar hakol defeed to make hanim bezol. According to Shiur Bar Rav, who says it's all about these, the cheap. All you have to pay is the minimum. Well, Ma'ikabein Tanakama Rabbi Yossi. They both say then once the 4th wall is up, you have to share in the cost. Right? If you're not going to give Demei Kanim Bezol, what could you possibly give? There's nothing less than that. Or maybe there is. Well, first answer. There is something less. You might think this is interesting or unlikely, but they claim that to hire a person to watch the border is actually cheaper than building a wall, even the cheapest kind of wall, or fence. So agar netira ikabenayu. Agar netira is the sachar, the salary for a watchman. Tanakama savar agar netira in to make hanim bezol lo. So Tanakama says all you have to pay is what you pay someone to stand there and watch your field. By the way, it makes it sound like it's more of the animals we're worried about. For Rabbi Yossi savar demekanim bezol, and that's the machloket. Second option, ibait ema rishona shniya v'shlishit ikabenai. It's whether in the end, after the fourth wall goes up, do you have to reimburse for the first, second, and third wall also? Tanakama savar revi'itu diyavle. Avar rishona shniya v'shlishit lo yavle. When somebody, we don't know who, puts up that fourth wall, so you have to share on the cost of the fourth wall, but you don't have to share on the cost of the first, second, and third. Why? Because when they went up, I hadn't done anything to benefit you yet because it's still open on all the other sides. So each time I put a wall up, you're actually exempt. Only the fourth one, do you become obligated. We don't, we already exempted you from the others. So we're not going to now make a new obligation, say, oh, well, we exempted you before, but now you're obligated. That's Tanakam. Rabbi Yossi Safar, no. Yes, we reopen it again. It's true they didn't help you until I did the fourth. Once I did the fourth, though, all of them are helping you, and therefore you have to share in the cost for all of them. Third option, now we start to get to who did the borders, who made the last gate, who put it up, the last fence. Tanakama sover tama da ama nikaf dimagalgalim alav. Tanakama is going to say, if you who are living on the inside put up that fourth wall, and I put up all three, and then you put up the fourth. If you put up the fourth wall, you show that you really wanted them, which means you now have to pay for everything. But amad makif, but if I did it, the outer person did it, eno noten lo ela demei revi'it. You only have to pay me for the fourth one. You have to share in the cost of the fourth, because you didn't ask for any of this. So all you have to do is the one that was useful to you, right? Because the other ones you were already exempt from. Rabbi Yossi savar lo shna nikaf lo shna makif, and this is how we read Rabbi Yossi in the beginning, and how Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, im ama v'gadar megalgalim alav et hakol. It doesn't matter who did the last wall. In the end, you benefit, you have to pay it all. You have to, again, half of it all. Lishna achrina, but here's a different version of that same machloket, okay? Meaning this is explanation three explained differently, so I kind of counted them as four explanations, but it's really a different version of explanation three, which, like I told you in the beginning, is going to flip it all. Tanakama is going to be the one who's more strict. Makif and nikaf ikabenayu, that is the difference between them, but in the following way. Tanakama savar im gadar makif et harivi, the outer person, me living on the outside, put up the fourth wall. Nami yavle, you have to pay everything. Doesn't matter that I did it, because you benefit. But Rabbi Yossi savar imamad nikaf v'gadar et harivi'it hu diyavle. If you got up and put up the fourth wall, then you would have to pay everything. Because galidate dinichale, because you showed that you cared and that you wanted it. Avalim gadar makif lo yavli midi. But if I did it, you don't have to pay me anything, because right? You benefited, but it didn't cost me any more. I anyway was doing it, so you don't have to pay me anything. And then it has Rabbi Yossi being on the more lenient side. Okay, that's it for now. So what we had in the second part, since I already reviewed the first, was this case of someone living at least on three, if not all four sides around another field. There's a field in the middle, and the person puts up these barriers. And the question is, these fences, does the other person have to pay for them? At what stage and for what? And we saw a lot of different interpretations. Again, it broke down into this basic machloket between Rav Huna and Shiur bar Rav about whether, when Rabbi Yossi says hakol, does he mean even whatever you spent, I have to pay you 50%? Or did he mean whatever, right? The minimum amount it would cost for me to pay for a gate, a fence of reeds, but not the fancy fence that you did. And then the question is, what's the debate between Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi, depending on which interpretation, right? For Shiur bar Rav, we had to come up with many different options. We have 4 different possibilities. With that, we finish for today. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov.